Hello, everyone, and welcome to HP Critical, a podcast where me and my friends discuss all things gaming. I'm your host, Brandon, and I'm joined by my pal, Jerel, here.
Hey, guys.
Today, we're discussing an interesting topic. It's a topic, well, it's hard to summarize, but let me do my best. Basically, we want to talk about how our perceptions of games changed throughout the years, both in our personal lives and, the gaming populace in general. Like, so, for example, when you're a child, sure, some children may enjoy games that are directed toward them, like your cute games like Pokemon or Mario. But there's a lot of kids that want to, play like mature games because, kids want to grow up faster than they should. And so they may gravitate to like a shooting game or something like that. And now that, we grow up and we get older, now a lot of us kind of want to bring it back down, like relive maybe a bit of our childhood innocence. We may gravitate to more, childhood games that we appreciated in the past. So this is going to be kind of a free-form discussion between me and Jerel. We're going to basically talk about maybe games that we enjoyed when we were younger and games that we enjoy now, see if that's really changed. And then we're going to talk about how gaming in general has changed for the populace. Specifically, why did certain games that we revere now did not get that same respect, at the time? Why are they revered now when they weren't then? So we're going to go into those two topics mostly. So let's start with the first one. Jerel, what kind of games when you were younger did you find yourself enjoying? What did you gravitate more towards?
Oh my god, I'm so excited for the second one because I automatically thought of the game. But
oh yes,
for me it was I used to play with my sisters, so it was a lot of family type games. My sisters are 5 years older than I am.
Okay.
So we did a lot of. I didn't have an SNES. We had a Sega Genesis.
Okay.
So I remember playing things like, Jurassic Park, until we got the Nintendo 64. Then it was a lot of Mario Kart and Diddy Kong Racing and Wave Race, a bunch of racing games that I could play with my siblings. And then the PlayStation 1 we got, we did lots of Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, until my sister stopped playing with me. Yeah, so, a lot of action adventure stuff. And then as I got older, I moved into things like, Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy X was my first and still my favorite Final Fantasy of all time. Moved over to,
Same here.
Yes, moved over to more RPGs and stuff. So it was pretty much just, the basic things that everyone else has played. Crash stuff, Spyro stuff. Banjo-Kazooie on the Nintendo 64. A bunch of action adventure titles, puzzle, platformers, that type of stuff.
Okay, yeah. For me, it's more or less the same. I gravitated. So my first system was the N64. I didn't have the Super Nintendo either, but I gravitated to a lot of party games when I was younger. I also did like a lot of action adventure games when I was younger. I didn't have like siblings that were really interested in like multiplayer games. So ironically enough, I have like all the Mario parties from 2 onwards, but I ended up playing a lot of them by myself. It's not until recent years where I started making like a lot of friends that I've really started to enjoy these multiplayer games and like actually had people, come over and play them. But yeah, my main thing was just like action adventure games, Mario Party. I did have one really good friend back when I used to live in New York, and he's the one that really like put me onto like a lot more genres than I was back then. And that's how I got into stuff like Legend of Zelda, Super Smash Brothers, Kirby, Pokemon, what have you. So I owe him a lot. But that's the main of my early games that I played. Just, a lot of action adventure. I didn't really play a lot of mature games. Like I was one of those few kids that was just not in a rush to grow up. My nephew once got me Turok 2 Seeds of Evil, and I was way too young to appreciate that game at the time. Like I was scared of the scary dinosaurs that were coming at me with talons. First person, blood everywhere. I was terrified. But yeah, like when I was younger, that's really it. Now, as I've gotten older, which I guess we'll transition to next, my tastes in games haven't really changed drastically over the years. I'm still gravitating mostly to like, family-friendly Nintendo stuff. I have started to, now that I've gotten older and can appreciate more mature literature and media and whatnot. I've branched out a lot. My horizons have expanded a lot more. I do play a few more M-rated games. Like Last of Us is like probably my all-time favorite game of the PlayStation 3, and that is a game that I would have never even looked at when I was 12 or whatever. And games like Catherine I can really appreciate because it was very deeply mature storyline that game deals with. So I still don't find myself attracted to games that are like overtly violent, that are violent for the sake of violence. Mm-hmm. I'm not a huge first-person shooter fan, mind you, but I can enjoy a game if it wants to tell like a more mature storyline, along with my family-friendly games. Is it the same for you? How's your gaming taste now?
So surprisingly, I have become when I went to college, my first bachelor's degree is in English, and that's just because I became enamored with storytelling and books and reading, and so I did a ton of reading. And so basically my gaming preference has become anything with an amazing story that I can love, like The Last of Us. And funny that you brought it up, because I remember before it came out, I was looking at it in Game Informer. And they had the pictures of like the setting, and they had the clickers. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, there's no way that I can play a game like this. This looks so scary. But I thought it was.
I think I remember you saying that even like, well, did you play Last of Us right when it came out, or did you pick it up later? That was later, right?
I played it for the first time last year.
That's what it was, yes, because I remember you were talking about it on our chat room about how you were playing for the first time and how you were so scared and everything.
Yeah, totally. I was still scared, but the storyline is what got me through that game, and that's why I gravitated a lot towards, aside from of course the family friendly stuff. Now my focus is pretty much on anything that has a great story. So a lot of JRPGs, a lot of sprawling RPGs, like stuff like Dragon Age, Persona 5, obviously one of my favorite games ever, Persona 4, the more of the Final Fantasy titles, anything that, oh my gosh, Octopath Traveler last year, whenever it came out, was another one of my favorites, because I got 8 stories instead of 1. So anything that right now, those are I do play a lot of stuff. I am actually looking forward to getting Modern Warfare. I still haven't yet. And I used to be in love with playing Overwatch, Resident Evil. Like I do play a lot of other things. Monster Hunter World. I played Monster Hunter for the first time. I'm playing my first Zelda game right now.
Yeah, you are.
Link's Awakening. So I'm definitely still branching into everything, but for sure my favorites are anything with good story, big RPG moments.
I am so happy that you brought up Link's Awakening, because that is actually a big thing that we're going to talk about for this next segment that we're going to discuss, is gaming perceptions for the community in general. So Link's Awakening, it's a Legend of Zelda game. It's a very cute Legend of Zelda game.
It's adorable.
It's absolutely adorable. And Legend of Zelda as a series has run the absolute gamut in terms of art styles. There are games that are like so dark and serious. You're looking at your Majora's Mask, your Twilight Princess games that are just so serious and so dark. And then you have games like Link's Awakening and Wind Waker. I feel like, this is a side note, but I feel like if you're a Legend of Zelda fan, you're in general, you're just like so open to like pretty much any kind of gaming styles that are out there, because you're really getting almost everything if you've played like almost every game, or at least most of them. But that's where I wanted to segue into, because I wanted to talk about the Wind Waker specifically. So that came out as a GameCube title. It's a very good game. It has its flaws, sure, but I think most people would agree that it's a very good Legend of Zelda game. But when that game first got announced for the GameCube, everyone was so against the new art style for that game. It's very cute art style, with Link having the big eyes and his head being kind of like bigger than his body. And there's still some today, I'm sure, who probably...
Toon Link in Smash?
Yes, it is. That's the origin of Toon Link. Yep. It was Wind Waker's where that design of Link made his debut. And yeah, at the time, people just really didn't like it. And there's reasons for that, because there's two main reasons that you can like kind of lock down to that. The one is that a few years prior, when the GameCube was first being demoed at the Space World showcase, they showed a very dark Legend of Zelda looking trailer where Link is having like this serious battle with Ganondorf. And then the next thing they show is this cute art style. People were denied this very serious Legend of Zelda game they were looking for. The second reason is where the divide really started coming to games was like with the N64 and PS1, and especially so with the GameCube and the PlayStation 2. Jerel, you mentioned that you had a PS1 as well, but you played like a lot of like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro games, right?
Yes.
You didn't really play any games like, say, the original Resident Evils or Metal Gear Solid or anything like that, or Twisted Metal?
Twisted Metal scared me.
Yeah, Twisted Metal scared me too. And not even because
what
clowns, and not even because clowns, because I've never been scared of clowns personally, but just the game's atmosphere like terrified me. I have a good friend that's like a huge Twisted Metal fan, but it was too scary for me. But yeah, but in general in PS1, you never really like touched any of those big M-rated games that people like love.
I did not. No.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, for the PS, and I was the same way. I got a PS1 very late in its life cycle, and I didn't get a whole bunch besides, like, licensed games that were not on the N64. But that aside, yeah, a lot of people that went to the PS1 were looking for those big RPGs that have those huge stories, or they were looking for these big mature storylines. It applied to both teenagers and just adults who just happened to be gamers at the time. That really applied to them. That's where PS1 really stood up from the N64, I feel. And that divide, I feel, became even more pronounced with the next generation, because GameCube got very, very few mature titles, even less than the N64, I would say. Whereas the PS2 and the new competitor at the time, the Xbox original, were so chock full of like these mature games. And it got to the point where if you were growing up the way I did, where I was like a teenager or a preteen to teenager playing the GameCube, you got a lot of people that kind of gave Nintendo fans guff because they were out here playing these cute baby games, whereas people who were playing the PS2 got these big epic storylines, or if you're playing like Xbox, these big mature shooters like Halo with all this like gore and what have you. It just kind of felt like there was a divide. And so this Legend of Zelda game comes out with Wind Waker being another cutesy game in a series that has otherwise been fairly serious, you know, and now it's never been cuter, and so people are like, well, what the fuck? I thought it's just like, this is their chance to really show them that, like, yeah, Link, swords, blades, bleeding blades, shit. No, we're going sailing on an adventure. When enemies die, they turn into smoke. It's like, so I understand it now. But that's why I'm just so happy now that with Link's Awakening, almost everyone saw this game and was so happy to see it. And so I wanted to ask.
I think it does depend on who you're talking to, just because I did hear a lot of people who were also not very happy with the way it looked.
Yes, you're right. I'm not. I would never suggest that everybody was on board with it. But the you know, with Wind Waker, it was definitely 70-30, 70 favor saying no, I don't like this art style. Yeah. Whereas now it feels more. I would even be bold to say 80-20, where if 80 people love the art style and the other 20 is like, no, it's not for me. Mm-hmm. So how do you think we got to this point, in your opinion? How do you think we came to this point where people just seem to be more open to this? It could be specifically about Legend of Zelda or just gaming in general.
You know, and my answer might segue into your next segment or question. So forgive me if I go too far. But I actually think a lot of it has to do with exactly our subject, which is us growing up and looking either for nostalgia or understanding things a bit more. Like I personally, like I said, this is my first Legend of Zelda game, and literally the only reason I decided to play it is because I thought it was adorable. I would have skipped it when it was first announced. Everyone was like, "Oh my god, this is great!" I was like, "I don't play Zelda. I don't care." Like, it was completely off my radar. And then I saw the beginning of it, and I was like, "Oh, this is so adorable!" And I bought it. And now I am.
I remember you retweeted someone showing off the intro part, and that sold you on the game.
Yes, I was like, this is so cute. I have to get this. And then, you know, I got encouraged by everyone on Twitter that was like, yo, you need to try this. And I was like, all right, let's go. I'm down for it. And I've loved every single moment of it so far.
Happy to hear that.
I do think that it is gamers evolving that have created this. Allowed the situation to work. And what I mean by that is a lot of things that, so for example, another great example about this is Resident Evil 2 remake that came out at the beginning of this year. Or even Kingdom Hearts 3. I'm going to talk about all of these a little bit. I had never played a Resident Evil game. The first Resident Evil game I think I played was Resident Evil 5, just because I was older by that point and they had all scared me beforehand. So I didn't play 4, 3, 2, none of them. So now that I'm, you know, old enough and I'm out of college and I'm doing things on my own, I found that we have this, Resident Evil 2 remake coming out, and I was like, wow, I now have an opportunity to play this classic game that I've never played before, just because at the time I didn't feel like I would be, unafraid enough to try it. So that was a perfect example of, growing up and then understanding a game and being able to play it. And I think the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening is another example. It was something that I had never had on my radar. Now that I've grown up a little bit more, I'm able to expand what I do like, and I'm able to give this thing a shot. And I think the biggest and most prevalent example of us understanding games and growing up and being interested in games that we weren't interested in before, aside from Resident Evil, is the Final Fantasy series.
Interesting.
I think with their release on the Switch, a lot of people have finally had the opportunity to actually play these games for the first time. Like, I had a PlayStation 1. I had never actually played Final Fantasy 7. I finished it for the first time this year. I also finished Final Fantasy 9 for the first time this year. So it actually gave me the opportunity to dive into these games. And a lot of people that I've talked to that have played the games, replaying them, they're just like, wow, this makes much more sense as an older person. So like when I was playing through Final Fantasy 9, I kept thinking, I don't remember what year it came out, but I kept thinking, like, I would not have understood half of what was going on in this game if I played it when it was released. Yeah. Same thing with 7. I was like, this 7 is, I love it, but it has a lot going on. There's like plots and side plots and convoluted nonsense. And I felt like 9 was exactly the same. Doesn't mean I don't love it, because I do. But there was like 3 different villains in that game, and like so much was going on. It was a huge world. And I was like, there's no way that my tiny mind would have understood any of this. Final Fantasy, I loved Final Fantasy 10. So after 10, I went straight to 12, because 11 was the MMO, the online MMO. And I didn't have enough money to get 12 at the time. So I ended up taking my GameStop and a collection of my games, not my GameStop, my GameCube, and a collection of my games to GameStop, traded all of them in just so I could get Final Fantasy 12. So Final Fantasy 12 is the reason that I don't have a GameCube anymore. That's how desperate I was to play a Final Fantasy game. I know. Crazy. And the worst part is that young me, half of everything that happened in that game went completely over my head, because that one's huge. It's political. A lot of people call it like the Star Wars of Final Fantasy, and I would 100% agree with them. It's all about like it's like Star Wars meets Game of Thrones meets Final Fantasy. It's huge. The characters are enigmatic and ridiculously adult. That game is adult. And so I think that's a perfect example, because when it first came out, I remember people hating on it so much. Like, no one liked it. It was so different. The battle system was completely different from what we had known. The characters, nobody liked Penelo or Vaughn, and like a lot of people were just like, no, this is not the Final Fantasy game we wanted. It sucks. Now it's crazy, because it's a complete 180, and everyone loves this game now. Everyone talks about how great it is. And I remember thinking, I used to love it. So every conversation I had was like, oh, everybody hates this game except for me. Now it's like on the top 5 list of a lot of people's Final Fantasy titles. And I think that all has to do with being able to grow up and completely understand a game in the way that it was meant to be understood, because now so many more people love it. But saying that, I also think that we kind of can get stuck in a situation where, and this is where Kingdom Hearts 3 is going to come in, where we look for things to evolve with us, and they don't always do that.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So if I could just cut in real quick before you continue. Yeah. What I was going to say was, I'm glad that you brought up like Final Fantasy 12 specifically, because that's another game that like has changed, like you said, changed perception over the years, where a lot of people weren't feeling 12 when it came out, and now it's being celebrated. I think there's another game that controversial opinion that you, I, Gray, and Christy carry about Final Fantasy 13. How we actually all enjoyed Final Fantasy 13.
Yeah, I was going to bring it up. Yes, I loved it.
Now that's a game I don't feel like everybody has quite turned around yet.
But when they had that when it became available on Xbox and it was like enhanced, and then everyone was able to buy it used at like GameStop and pop it in an Xbox and replay it, it did get, better reviews after that. Like people were actually talking about it in a more positive light because they were able to replay the title.
So the progress is definitely there, and I feel like if they ever released a FF13 like trilogy or something, they would probably get even high. It would be even more praise. We're getting off topic. I just wanted to talk about that real quick about how those games change. So you were saying about Kingdom Hearts evolving with us.
I think that's and also Final Fantasy 15. I'm going to talk about both of them a little bit. I do think that those are games that were meant to evolve with us and didn't necessarily do so properly. I think. Going from, I know that you've played like every single Kingdom Hearts game. I have not, but you guys have educated me on almost everything. Going from Kingdom Hearts 2 and playing like 1 or 2 in between over to Kingdom Hearts 3, but knowing the story, I enjoyed the game. I liked it a lot. But from the time that Kingdom Hearts 2 came out until the time that Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, one of my biggest gripes with the game was that I felt like it was just missing so much of what today's games have. Like in my head, in 2019, there's no reason that a game like Kingdom Hearts 3 should not have been open world, So
I see what you're saying.
It boggles my mind that I walked into invisible walls in this huge game. Like, I'm thinking, all right, this game is going to evolve with me. Like, but not only from a story standpoint, but like a gameplay standpoint, where I was playing everything else that I had played throughout this year is pretty much open world or seemingly so, that I don't walk into invisible walls and notice things like that. Because it's 2019. I don't think I've had that issue in like 3 years in playing games on the PS4. Like, I don't think I've run into an issue like that where I assumed that this game was going to be something gameplay wise and it was something else. So that type of stuff was very jarring, and I was like, wow, this is not something that I'm used to. But also the story, I think, was a little subpar with certain characters. Like, I wholly accepted Kairi and Axel to be, after, watching some footage and seeing they're working together to train as Keyblade Masters. I was expecting a lot of stuff that, kind of fell flat, that I didn't get. A lot of character development was left behind. And of course that could be because there's like 10 million characters to talk about.
Yep.
And then we even have, the situation where there are no Final Fantasy characters in this game. Things that we expected, we didn't get. And growing up, you kind of notice them more. Like, I feel like if I were younger, I would probably not care so much about what happens to, Kairi and Axel. And, I would care more about the overarching plot than I would about specific characters. But because I've grown up with these characters, and because I love them so much, and because I've spent so much time with them, and I've waited so long for them to get to this point, it was much more disappointing for them to not evolve as I feel like they should have.
And that's definitely a problem that some games carry, where they've existed for a long time, and then the evolutions may not be as pronounced as what people may like,
Yeah, I feel like you don't care when you're younger. Like, I don't really feel like I cared that much when I was first playing the first Kingdom Hearts game. I was just like, oh my god, Disney, Final Fantasy, I just finished Final Fantasy X. This is amazing. Look at, like, all the Final Fantasy characters meeting up with Disney characters. This is awesome. But now that I'm older, I'm like, all right, you better give me a good story to go along with all these years that I've been following. And
the thing with Kingdom Hearts 3 is there was no Final Fantasy characters in that game.
Exactly. No Final Fantasy characters. And I feel like the characters that I did grow up to love just didn't follow suit.
But yeah, that's definitely a problem too, where like, that's unique to like long running game series too. You have to, when they come out, they do have to evolve with player interest, and that's probably one of the biggest problems for game developers, because how do you balance that? How do you balance between the longtime fans who want what they like but evolved, and alienating them with stuff that's like too different? I feel like the Mario games balance this pretty well, with the Super Mario games anyway.
And you know what that is a problem for? Sorry, do you know what that's a problem for? Pokemon.
Listen, Pokemon has definitely had struggles with that.
Biggest problem for Pokemon right now.
Biggest problem for Pokemon. In fact, I'll get more into that in a second. But for Mario, like, the original game is just about, go to the end of a level, jump on enemies, gain power-ups, get to the end of the level, right? Super Mario, as it went forward, actually, it's funny that we're talking about Kingdom Hearts Invisible Walls. Super Mario 64 was the first game that had those invisible walls. There's a mechanic in a sign in Mario 64 that specifically says, sometimes when you're going to the boundaries of worlds, you'll find invisible walls. like it literally says that in Mario 64. It's an early-ass N64 game. They wanted to make sure that players didn't go too far with their newfound freedom, that they have to go in all directions instead of just 1 and 2. So there's like, hey, there's invisible walls. You can only go so far. And then, but with Mario Odyssey, and then, goes forward to the Mario games, like, I feel like that series has managed to balance it pretty well by, giving players power-ups to work with, and then giving them more freedom to go, like, in bigger worlds while still not alienating the fans. But yes, now we can transition to Pokemon. That game has definitely struggled with evolving, no pun intended, with the fan base. Because at its core, it's still at its core, it's still very much the same game. You start off as a kid in a small town, get your first starter Pokemon, collect badges, go fight champion, maybe fight an evil team along the way. And there's been a few improvements here and there. There's been new types. Sometimes they'll add features like Pokemon contests. And sometimes they may get a little crazy. Like Pokemon Black 2 White 2 was notably the first game where you start off in a city in front of a town, but it was still like, the core experience through and through. And it's pretty much that. They'll add new Pokemon, they'll add a few new features for like battle, stuff like that. And the story will be a little bit different, but you're pretty much getting what you've always signed up for, with just maybe slightly better graphics if it's like, going from your same system, or if it's a new system, better hardware, whatnot. But it's a similar experience. You know what you're signing up for. Most Pokemon fans are fine with the fact that the series doesn't change too much. It's almost the same way.
Are sick of redoing the same tutorial over and over.
Tutorial is something that they're sick of. They will redo the entire game. They'll do a game that plays almost identical to almost all the other past games in the series. But if they do a tutorial again, they will lose their minds.
And
but
Sun and Moon had the worst one. Sorry.
And yeah, Sun and Moon did have the worst one. And it's fair too, because it's one thing to go through an adventure that's familiar but different. It's another thing to be taught something that you already know. Mm-hmm. Like having your handheld when you're able to walk on your own,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the progression of evolution in games. Where some games will change, some will stay the same, and then it's all how our tastes evolve as well. Like, what are we interested in?
Yeah, I mean, Pokemon is a kid's game. Like, I hate to, I'm going to play it because it's one of my favorite franchises, but it's meant to be for children, accessible for children. And that's exactly why we got, Let's Go as a part of the franchise, to be able to introduce a younger audience and make it easier for them to get into that Pokemon world. But then Pokemon also has, the competitive scene, which is for older and younger generations. So I think it does sit a very fine line between both, and a lot of times it does a good job at allowing for both generations of this game to evolve with it.
Sure, absolutely, and that's a benefit of long-running games, I would even say, because it's like what we were talking about before, how our gaming interests have. But okay, actually, that's a good segue into another question that I wanted to ask you. So, for the most part, I think from our conversation, we've gathered that you and I have more or less had a similar game interest, that they've evolved a little bit and changed over the years. How do you think that is for the average person that may be our age that is playing a game? Do you think that the average person our age is playing the exact same games that they were playing when they were younger today, or have they assimilated more like we are, or just completely changed? Like, what's your opinion?
Good. To answer your question, I do believe that a lot of people are. So first, I guess I would say that I think we are in the prime age for video games. And by that, I mean that when developers are making games, I think they're aiming them towards our age group.
I agree.
Like, if you look at anything that's coming out soon that people are anticipating, Cyberpunk, Death Stranding, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Last of Us 2, all of these games are not meant for kids. Like, like literally none of them are meant for children. You might be able to, pull off Animal Crossing if your kid is old enough and chill enough for something like that, because it does take a chill child to log in every day and take care of a town. But even that, I would say, is for an older audience.
Oh my goodness, Jerel, you've hit on something that I didn't even consider until you started talking. Gaming as an industry has been around for a long time, and it's like you said, all these games that are coming out, they're explicitly meant for people in our age group, and they're like mid to late 20s, the 20s group basically, with a few differences here and there. But it's almost entirely towards that age group, and 30s, true. But what I'm saying is like, back then, gaming was a much more insular thing. So when you marketed your games, it was almost exclusively these games like Super Mario, because who else was playing them besides kids? As we started getting to N64 and PS1, we're starting slowly, little by little, getting some of these more mature games, because they're starting to realize that there's some people that have maybe been playing. Like, for example, if there's like a teenager that started playing the NES, right, and they grew up and they were still playing games, well, now they'll want to play something like Metal Gear Solid or your Final Fantasy VII that has these complicated stories, because now they're in their like 20s, right?
Exactly.
And it's coming more and more because because more and more kids are playing games these days. So naturally, the industry is targeting us, our age group, more because we grew up with them. I think that's going to continue going forward as well, where there's always the balance. I think is going to become even more. It's going to become more closer to the even 50-50, because it's just going to become that kind of thing where it's like movies. There's what would you say the movie balance is between like a movie that's like maybe PG or G to like a PG-13 to an R movie? Do you think it's fairly balanced right now?
I have no idea, actually.
Yeah, it's tough, but I think I can answer my own question. If you look at like all these big Marvel movies or these Star Wars movies that like get so much money each year, those are the big multi-movie franchises that are like constantly PG-13. I think that answers my question there. That it's because those are movies that are, kids will enjoy them for us because it's Star Wars, it's Marvel, kids like that stuff, but they're for like older people who grew up with that stuff as well. And then you have your R-rated movies, which of course are targeted more towards adults. I think gaming is going to very much go into that kind of same balance where we're already there, and with all those games you said that are coming up. Actually,
and I mean,
so I think this is going to continue.
I was just looking at my library of PlayStation 4 games, and I kept thinking like, how many of these games would I let my nephews play who are,
I'm looking at my PS4 game list right now too, as you say that.
I don't know. Like maybe Uncharted and Spider-Man, but like definitely not God of War.
Oh my god. I'm looking at my list right now. I have Danganronpa, Tekken 7, Grand Theft Auto 5, and Until Dawn all stacked up right above each other.
Exactly. And those are not something that you give to an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old for that matter.
Oh my god, no.
And even, games that are coming to the Switch has become like an open area for anything now. So I wouldn't let them play Octopath, like, especially not Primrose's Story, or Cyrus's. Those get pretty dark. Luigi's Mansion, yeah, sure. Link's Awakening, yeah, sure. But, I mean, I'm not looking at my Switch library at the moment, but a lot of the indie titles that are coming to Switch are definitely rated M for mature or, older. So yes, the Switch is definitely a place for family friendly titles, but, I'm not going to make my 10-year-old play Final Fantasy 12 remake on Switch because that's a bad idea.
Yeah. And that's a good point, and that's another good point too. We were talking earlier about like the gaming consoles. N64 had a few M-rated games, but it was definitely the place you wanted to go if you wanted to play more family-friendly games. Where PS1, all of its big hits were like the either T-rated games or the M-rated ones. Now we're at a point where certain systems might be more well-known for something, but in general, if you're going to Switch, you have a wide variety, like you said, you have a wide variety of games to play, from like the family-friendly Luigi's Mansion or Smash to something more mature like Dead by Daylight's on Switch.
I was just going to say, Dead by Daylight's on Switch, The Witcher 3 is on Switch, and, no.
No, not for kids.
And even, the marketing that Nintendo does for the Switch has changed. So that we have seen in their own marketing, and I probably talked about this before, but in their own marketing, we've seen situations in which we have young adults who are in their 20s walking around playing their Switch, riding on the subway playing their Switch, in their 30s.
And you never saw that before of commercials.
Exactly.
If you go back to those old commercials, very few of them had
kids.
Yeah.
Playing on GameCubes and 3DSs. Now it's like, Karen at a rooftop party having drinks playing her Switch. Like, that is the reality of the Nintendo Switch right now. That's definitely, that is the way to show that your gaming is growing up with your audience when your marketing starts doing things like that.
Oh my God. That's a statement on marketing too, because that's very targeted as well, because the very first Switch trailer, the one you're referencing with Karen at the rooftop party, that trailer had almost entirely adults in that one.
Yeah,
right?
Like these grown dudes in the backseat of a van after playing basketball, like they are adults who have jobs.
Yeah, and they're cooling down by playing some NBA 2K on their Switch before they go back. Which I don't know how many. We're not going to talk about how realistic those trailers are. The point is, adults were in those trailers, right? And then if you go back to like the 3DS trailers, there's a few like kids in those. They especially target to kids if you're looking at 2DS, because that's more suited for kids. But for Switch, no, they were going for the throat in terms of like, hey, no, adults are playing this. Now for the Switch Lite ones, I'm noticing they have more kids, because that's more targeted towards kids who play handhelds mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's become a bigger balance in terms of like the marketing, and that's just showing how gaming taste has evolved.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the perfect example of what you were saying. Now, what was your question that I started answering and stopped?
My question, we were asking like, how do you think gamers today are playing the same games as they once were?
Now, saying all of that, I do think that developers are growing with their audience, like I said, and I do think that that audience is targeted in games like Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, etc., and that's us. And what I don't see is developers creating those entry level titles for a younger generation. So by that I mean, like, I'm sure that, working on Final Fantasy 16 or the Final Fantasy 7 remake, that's not, I guess it could be an entry title for a teenager who's never played a Final Fantasy game before.
Sure.
But I don't see it as that. I don't see it as the Pokemon Let's Go of the Final Fantasy series, if that makes sense.
Sure. It makes sense.
The Last of Us 2, another great example, for a kid coming into their own age, wanting to play some, more mature titles. I don't think that that's a game that I would start them with. Telltale, I think, would have been a really good place to start that, because I think that they do have some serious things going on, but there's also like, the Walking Dead, for example, like that's something that I would play with a younger child, as long as it's not too like, graphic or crazy. Something that you can play together that evolves them into older gaming on their own, so that they can do something like play Detroit later on. But I think that Final Fantasy is going to have that problem. I think that a lot of developers are going to have that problem, because right now, I was just speaking to my nephews, and I literally, this is a short story. I took my nephew to, I don't know if I told you this, but I took my nephew to GameStop, and I was like, I have a credit card. You can buy anything you want at a GameStop, like anything you want. Like, just pick one thing, whatever you want. And he's like, all right, I want a PlayStation gift card. And I was like, we're in GameStop. You have an unlimited credit card. Are you sure that all you want is a PlayStation store card? And he was like, yeah, that's it. And I was like, one more time, are you completely positive? This is your last chance. And he was like, yes. I was like, okay, what are you going to do with it? I'm going to buy V-Bucks for Fortnite.
I saw that coming.
I was like, but Link's Awakening is out right now. Link's
Awakening. So this is recent.
Yes, this is the day that I bought Link's Awakening. This is the same day that I bought Link's Awakening. It was literally last month.
Man.
And this has happened on multiple occasions. Like for Christmas, I was like, okay, what do you guys want to play? We just want V-Bucks for Fortnite. And I think that gamers right now are very stuck. Younger generation is very stuck on things. Like, right now it's Fortnite or, something of that, genre or caliber that I don't see too many kids, unless it's like a Nintendo game, I don't see too many kids branching off into all the titles that we used to play. So like, I even let, some other kids play Kingdom Hearts 3. I was like, oh, you guys like Disney. You'll probably enjoy this game. It's not too much Final Fantasy. It's mostly Disney. And I also let my nephews, play Kingdom Hearts 1. So I was like, oh yeah, you can try it 3 now. Like it's fine because they don't care about the story. They were like super young. Who cares? They're just like, oh, Disney. And they started it and they're like, I want to go play Fortnite. And I was like, what? Like they don't have that drive for that action adventure.
To be fair to Kingdom Hearts, that game has a lot of Disney characters, of course, so kids would love it just to like look at it and stuff like that. That game is complicated for a little kid, though. It can be.
I don't think so. Sorry, I shouldn't say little kid. They're like 8 and 10 years old, like 11 and 10. So
no, 8 and 10, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
If it's like real small, it might be too much.
Younger,
but
no.
But I got my nephew into Kingdom Hearts, the series, when he was like 8 or 9, and he was fine with it after a little, figuring some stuff out.
Yeah. So they played the first one, and then like now though they're kind of stuck in this whole Fortnite thing. And I think that that type of gaming model is coming out a lot, and it's continuing the way that it is. And I feel like it's going to trap a lot of the younger generation and not encourage them to try other titles, just based on experience from my friends who also have kids who are talking about, just being stuck on something like Fortnite or anything in that genre. That's just like that gotcha genre of, you do the same things over. The popular stuff, like anything that's on stream that's popular. Like I don't see kids really getting into RPGs now, for example. Like not even like I played WoW when I was like 14. I don't even know if people are doing, MMOs like that. If they're interested in those types of games, and I don't see developers making those games for kids. So I am a little scared. This is probably all just in my head, and it probably doesn't matter. But for the younger generation, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen that one game that has like latched teens and young adults on like Fortnite that is not in the FPS genre.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because as kids,
whereas we were playing stuff like, everything we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, because back then, you had to have so many games to get these experiences, because we grew up in a time where online wasn't nearly as prevalent as it was then, if at all. So we didn't have like constantly changing things when we played our games that like, I can understand the appeal of Fortnite because every time you go on, it's a different thing because you're playing against different people and you're trying to go for the victory royale or whatever. For the N64 games, for example, if you bought a party game and had enough siblings or friends, you could probably spend a lot of time on that. But otherwise, you're looking at a lot of these single-player games, and when you're finished with them, you're finished with them.
Yeah.
And
you have to go on to something else. And Fortnite is perpetually continuing. Like, there's no end.
Perpetually continuing. And it's free!
Yeah, and it's free. And it's also free to play online.
Exactly. Unless you're buying the V-Bucks, which that's completely optional, a kid can just pop open Fortnite and just have fun. Their parents are cool with it because it's free. Their kid will occasionally maybe want to get some V-Bucks so their kid can get some cool equipment. That's a price they're willing to pay. And now that it's on everything, it's on phones. It's on phones.
And we also don't have, if you're looking outside of Nintendo, we also don't have, that hang out and play video games around the living room with your friends thing because everyone's online now. We don't have very many couch co-op games anymore unless you're looking at the Switch.
Yeah, exactly. Couch co-op games are definitely more relevant on the Switch, and there's a problem with that too because that really needs a balance too. We're getting a little off topic, but I just want to say this real quick because Nintendo. I love Nintendo dearly, but sometimes they're so behind on stuff. Sometimes they'll make these wonderful couch co-op games that don't have enough online components. And then if you're like, you and I, we don't live particularly.
You mean like Mario Party?
Yeah,
because
like Mario Party.
God, what a disappointment.
Oh my God! How did they? They finally put online, but it was basically nothing. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into that topic because that's a whole nother discussion right there. But I do think that there could be a nice balance between couch co-op and online because both have their merits depending on how you live and what kind of games you like to play. And Fortnite just works so well because it can do both. It's obviously an online game, but you can also get a bunch of kids that play in the same server and play together that way. I've seen it happen on many times I go to family gatherings, and because it's crossplay too. I have one kid that's playing Fortnite on his PS4. two kids that are playing either on their phones or tablets, but they're all playing the same game. So they're in the same room, but they're still all playing together. So it covers both bases.
Exactly. Very
I
true.
can't even. I'm not a Fortnite player, but I can't hate on that because it's fulfilling the needs.
Oh, also, just a little also off topic, but back to something we said earlier. Two of the biggest games that I played on the Switch this year that I loved, one of them being my game of the year right now, is Fire Emblem and Astral Chain. And both of those are definitely not for kids. Like, in any form of, especially not Fire Emblem. Like, that game is, no. Like, even the without spoiling it for anyone who hasn't played, but even the intro cinematic is like, whoa, okay.
Like,
this game's about to get so serious.
All I gotta say is you'll die for that, and it's like, whew.
Yeah. Then I was like, well, this is not for kids. And I think that's
way darker than pretty much any Secret Fire Emblem.
Like that's another example of what I mean by, these companies growing with its audience. Like, story-wise, that game is my game of the year right now, still.
Same here.
And that is like an evolution of the Fire Emblem series based on, of course, like, I don't know because I haven't played all of them, but based on what I've heard and based on what you guys have told me, this is probably like the most in-your-face, blatant, like, this is not a kid's game from the series ever.
Yeah. For sure.
So I do think we're growing along with these developers. So it'll be interesting to see because I forgot, I was listening to a podcast. I don't remember which one, and they were talking about Final Fantasy, and they were talking about the next generation of Final Fantasy, and they were discussing how Tetsuya Nomura is like 50 something at this point, and he started when he was like 25, and it's the same thing with a lot of Nintendo employees who are like in their 50s and 60s who started when they were in their 20s, and if they don't get replaced, we won't have that new younger generation stuff to get us all, because we grew up essentially with them. Tetsuya created Kingdom Hearts for us, and like he's getting older with us, so we're getting the Final Fantasy remake from those original creators like however many years later, and unless they find a way to get a younger generation in there to start creating and making these new innovative ideas that'll bring in the new generation, this conversation is getting a little scary.
Yeah, it is pretty kind of scary, but I'm also hopeful, and I'm hopeful, and we'll make this like the last time because this is getting a little long, but like, so I'm hopeful because like you said, we have these developers that have been around for a long time, but at the same time, they realize that their time is coming, and they are starting to groom the next generation. And a good example of that is with Splatoon, actually, because Splatoon specifically is being made by younger developers of Nintendo. The same thing with ARMS, but more so with Splatoon, where, they are games that are very much considering how the audience is changing. Splatoon is a very style-centered game because, style is becoming more important because more people are playing games. It's not just like one click group or whatever. So style is important because more people are playing, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why Splatoon has gotten so big in Japan for that reason. Then it's an online shooter game that dared to do something very different, where the objective, where you can shoot your opponent, sure, but the objective is to like paint the territory and whatnot, and then you have all these abilities. It's a very Nintendo game, but it also feels like it's looking at what's around them and taking that into account. And if we get more developers that are, evolving but also staying traditional to the, us, I think we could be in for some good games. So regardless of how tastes change in gaming, I think there'll always be something for someone to play. And there's just more people than ever playing these games. And, who knows what the kids of today, they're playing Fortnite now. Who knows what they'll be playing in the future? Maybe they'll be playing Last of Us 5.
Yeah,
or maybe they'll be playing Fortnite 3. Maybe Fortnite.
Oh,
maybe
my
God. Maybe Fortnite will just never die, and that'll just become the game. But you know what? Even if it does, there's always the industry is going in such a way that there'll always be like games for everyone to play because it's the biggest form of media out there right now. That's just how it is.
Or we'll all just be stuck playing all these games as the gaming generation.
But the point, yeah, probably.
But I will say really quickly, because I know we're wrapping up, I will say that my faith is in Nintendo, because I don't see the PS5 being a seller for, you know, a younger generation. Neither do I see the Xbox One, or I'm sorry, the Xbox, whatever it's going to call it, Project Scarlet, whatever it'll be. But I think the Wii was the perfect innovation for family gaming.
Yep, I agree.
Think the Switch is also becoming that, because it's portable, because the Joy-Cons are attached to it. You can just simply take it off, play with friends. They have games. They have a lot of party games. So I do think Nintendo is going to be keeping the family in gaming. And I do think that because the Switch is opening up to so many different games, like there are M-rated games on the eShop right now.
Yeah,
The fact that the Switch is so open is also giving me hope for a younger generation. Yeah, and everybody has one, so.
Absolutely. So I think I just think that, like, and this, I have a closing thought. I'll ask for your closing thoughts, and then I'm going to ask a question to our audience members who listen to the podcast. So my closing thought is, you know, if we come into an era with Legend, I started this early with Legend of Zelda, and I'm going to end with it. If we can get to a point where a game like Link's Awakening is mostly adored by the fans who are used to other games like Twilight Princess, stuff like that, and we can love it as opposed to Wind Waker, then I think there's hope for like all kinds of games out there to be appreciated by anyone, really. We're at a point where games are an art form, and they can do whatever art form they choose, and there'll be an audience for it. And I'm glad that we've kind of evolved to that point where nothing is lambasted just because it wasn't exactly what the industry was suggested it needed to be. And I appreciate that. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I do. The only thing I'd like to say is that people who are bitching about remakes don't, because I think remakes are amazing. I think they give opportunities for some of us in this gaming generation who have never played these games before the opportunity to actually play them for once. Even remasters as well. I have been able to complete a lot of my Final Fantasy library thanks to the Nintendo Switch and the ability to replay remasters that I will play for the first time, remasters. So don't complain about Resident Evil 2 remake, because that was awesome. It was my first time playing that game. Even the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, I am in my gaming prime, and I'm able to finally play some classics like Final Fantasy VII and the updated one coming up next year. So don't bitch and complain about gaming remakes, because they're freaking awesome. That's it.
Yep, and that reminds me, this is very topical. The whole Death Stranding thing recently getting, you know, confirmed for PC. Yeah. Like if you're canceling your pre-order for the PS4 because you just want a version that's superior, that's cool. I can respect that. But if you're canceling just because it's now going to be available for more people to play and enjoy, you are an absolute disgrace. I will just put that out there.
Yeah, don't be a poop head.
Don't do that. Like making games that are going to be celebrated, or maybe not, whatever. It doesn't matter, because Death Stranding hasn't come out yet. But in general, if the game is good,
Kojima, he's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Don't do that to him. But what I was going to say is, like, if a game is good, give people as many opportunities they can to play it. Like you were saying, don't get upset about remakes, because that if anything, that gives you more people to talk about the game. You know, gatekeeping is bad stuff.
Horrible.
Man. Just let people enjoy the games on whatever it happens to become available on, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
But we do need to talk about this later, because I do think that exclusives are important, because that's the only reason people buy certain platforms, and I have other thoughts on it. But we'll tackle that on another.
I think we should too, yeah. Anyway, so my closing question to all of our listeners is, how does your games taste change? Do you find yourself enjoying different games than what you enjoyed when you were younger? Do you enjoy the same games but maybe a little bit different? Or has your gaming taste stayed completely static your entire life? All of those are valid, but we want to hear all of it. So we want to thank you guys for listening to this episode of HP Critical. It was a very fun discussion, and, you know, thanks for listening. We will catch you guys next time. Goodbye. Bye.